You do use multiple points of view in the story, and what you just read for us from Henry's point of view, who at the time was 12, how many other points of view are in the story?
There are 4 points of view. There's my father, his sister, his father, and his mother. So it's male, female, and then it repeats. So it's not, changing all that many times. There's 8 chapters, so you get 1 chapter in each of the 4 points of view, and then it's repeated, and then a coda. So I like to think of it as a quartet.
Oh, that's beautiful. So it's a musical as well. Why did you choose the multiple points of view?
I knew I had to write in different points of view because the family split up and they had completely different trajectories geographically.
Where did they go?
After they were in Siberia, they're separated. My grandfather leaves first to try to join the military, leaving them behind. They end up making the trip to Uzbekistan, very tough trip. And my father sent to military school in Persia, or actually in Palestine, was a country at the time, and the women and children are sent to Tanzania.
Oh
so
my.
I needed the different points of view for that. And then also interviewing my father and my aunt, I realized I'm getting different stories because, experience is subjective, memory.
Yes, many truths.
Yes. So, I would get some discrepancies and then I'd have to go back to the other one, and just very different from their ages and different genders and just their role in the family.
So that choice of multiple point of view was something you made as you got into the writing, or was it a conscious choice from the very beginning?
I knew from the beginning.
Okay. Now, Aquila Polonica, your publisher, specializing in the Polish experience of World War II, when I was looking through the press kit, Terry Tegnazian, the president and co-founder, said, "We've noticed that women readers who have not traditionally been the dominant consumers of war literature, but who are the dominant buyers of books, are attracted by first-person storytelling that illuminates the human side of war." Why do you think that's so?
I think that most war literature isn't written from a female point of view. Aquila Polonica has some other books that do that. I find it interesting whenever I tell someone I have a novel, they assume it's chick lit, and then I get to say, no, it's about World War II, and that kind of takes them aback. And I think the voices that I've chosen, the different genders, allow for male and female readers to be sucked into the story.
And you do that really well. I want to ask you about the reader's guide, because you do have a reader's guide that's included at the back of the book. And there was one question about the lasting effects of the family's exile from Poland on each of the 4 characters. Can you talk a little bit about how that experience affects the next generation? And I understand that is, I think, a question, a great question to ask for people who are reading the book and maybe in book clubs and book discussion groups. But you've had the up-close and personal way of observing. So when you look at your father's experience, Henry, your Aunt Helen's experience, what then comes down to you, the daughter?
I think that researching and writing the book, and my cousins will attest, that I learned where I came from, why I am the way I am, because of how my parents, my father stressed education more than anything. Not having excess, not having extra things, not taking things for granted. And I think that it's very important for this generation and the generations to come to realize what life was like when there weren't cell phones and et cetera, and just how much we take for granted in this country.
Well, there's a scene in the book where the Russian soldiers come in the middle of the night. They're pounding on the door. They come in, bayonets are drawn. They're waking up the family. They tie, they tie your father's father to a table with his face against the wall so he can't see what's happening. And I think about that scene, and then the soldiers tell your mother to pack what you can carry and bring warm clothing and bring food for 6 months. And how many times, you go to writers' conferences, or there's how-to articles about creating characters, and one of the things that always comes up is, well, if your character had to leave, if the house were on fire and your character had to leave, what would she grab? So did any of that occur to you when you were doing the research for this and thinking, what would I have taken? What would I take now if that were the situation?
The dictionary.
The dictionary,
The
yeah.
dictionary, the book that you take on the island when you're deserted,
Yeah.
the Encyclopedia of Man. How can you get bored? Every word's in there. But it's interesting that you mentioned the scene where my grandfather's tied, because another thing with getting the multiple points of view, that's a pivotal experience in the book, and you hear that experience from each character, because it's a boy seeing his father tied and trying to step up to the plate and being the man of the family. And imagine the father being tied with his back to them. And you must lose a bit of your manhood knowing your wife has seen you tied to the table.
And he can't defend her should that need. Fortunately, in that situation, it did not. We have a few more minutes left, Tricia, and I want to ask, I marked another spot in that book, and I would love it if you would read the second green tag, because it gives another perspective from another character.
This is from chapter 4, from Zofia's point of view, my grandmother. It's called Train Again, en route south to Uzbekistan, 1941. Stay inside while the men fight the cold, walking to the frozen forest. Stay in the cabin and stay busy. Cook a meal out of dried mushrooms and dried fish. If not so fortunate, improvise porridge again without using too much of the remaining flour. Pretend that it is all okay, that the porridge does not taste like glue. Look Joseph carefully in the eyes with a look that says, "Don't worry, my youngest, we'll go home." It's not lying, it's survival. Sweep, sweep, sweep. Keep the dust and thoughts away. Don't let the children know you are afraid. Keep time going, flowing forward and not back again to the farm, the lovely ripening trees bearing apples, plums, and pears, those delicate hours of tree light and sun. Sweep, sweep, sweep. There's a rhythm to keep time going so as not to stop and grow torpid, heavy with despair. Time didn't pull as it used to on our farm, our orchards. Time used to pass swiftly. The children somehow grew up right in front of our eyes, but now time stopped, growth stopped. 2 interminable winters in Siberia had taken a toll on all of us. At least it was finally summer, almost 2 full years after the war had started. Henrik and Helen were in the forest picking blueberries and mushrooms that I would drive for next winter. Joseph was still sulking because I wouldn't let him go with his older brother and sister. There would be a next winter, we hoped, though we prayed not in Siberia. I wasn't sure we could survive another winter in the Arctic taiga, but somewhere, perhaps back on our farm in Poland. But Andrei believed we would never return. He could not go through another deportation, another instance of being tied in front of his children. It was gambling, the communist deck stacked to win. Andrei missing behind his eyes, smoking his pipe, walking and looking nowhere. He had aged in the last 18 months. We all had. I did not want to admit, yet he the most. Helcha and Henrik acted more like adults than children. Their silliness, once embodied in Henrik's games and Helcha's songs, were truncated, left in a different life, those former versions of ourselves lost. School for the children was jerry-rigged. The children who, more so than usual as typical children in school, found it difficult to concentrate. Yet were happy to be learning again, sitting in ordered rows, makeshift desks. Henrik missed the orchards, and Helcha, her routine on the farm, singing hello to rooster, hen, her interrupted 16-hood. And Joseph, too young to know, he was the luckiest, or perhaps the most scarred. Every week, if possible, I had tried to barter an item of clothing, such as a pair of stockings, a pillowcase, a curtain, or whatever I could, in exchange for 1 or 2 pints of milk for Joseph. On occasion, I exchanged my sewing and mended a pair of pants or a coat for one of the locals' children. The mothers understood how important this milk was for my youngest, and the word traveled among them. If they weren't able to trade, they helped to find another woman who could. I was incredibly grateful for their empathy. I didn't feel like I was begging anymore, as the first time when I asked shamefully, unable to meet their glances.
Oh, Krisha. You know, this is what I love about the story. You take an experience, and with the detail, such intimate, telling, descriptive details, you make it all come alive. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm curious, when you finished, well, let me go back a minute. Each of the chapters, does each chapter open with a piece of your poetry, the way the two excerpts you read for us?
The two excerpts that I read, the first part of the excerpt was in italics, which is kind of prose poetry, which I kind of learned from Hemingway and a couple other writers. And in addition to that, there's poems that I didn't read. There's actually Helen's poems interspersed throughout. So in front of every chapter, you get a poem of Helen's describing, you know, being on the train or being in Africa.
Tell me about what it was like when you finished writing, when you hit the end. What did you do?
I think I was a little shocked. I mean, I sent it out. I read it over and over and over again. I mean, I've read this book probably 50, 100 times, just page by page.
Sure.
But just so grateful that I forced myself to finish. And, you know, I wanted the story to be out while my family was still, you know, around.
Did you send it to any publishers other than Aquila Polonica? I mean, they seem to be the perfect one because this is what they focus on, the Polish experience in World War II.
I sent it to a few different publishers. It's been a learning experience for me. I kind of understand the whole business better. I really lucked out that Aquila Polonica specializes in Poland in World War II. So I was very, very lucky that they, you know, loved the book and were willing to take it on.
What was the editorial experience like?
A lot of notes, a lot of historical notes and quibbling over words, and I enjoyed it for the most part. Sometimes I had to hold my ground at the end and say, no, I like the way that word sounds poetically. But I'm glad that, you know, I had historians reading the book and fact-checking. And
yeah, there's a lot to it, isn't there? Yeah. What's next for you?
My second book is done. I'm just tweaking the second half of it.
What's that about?
It's called The Glass House of Forgetting, and it's a novel that takes place in a glass bed and breakfast on an island off Tunisia, and it's a bed and breakfast where people go to forget horrible things that have happened. The proprietors have, you know, lost a daughter under circumstances that, you know, even aren't clear. There's different stories of what really happened to her. But their friend, an architect, designs this building to help them forget because of the ocean. And so you get a series of guests who come and heal.
So I would immediately think, okay, this is fiction, but is there any part of this that is based on fact?
I mean, of course, there's always things, you know, there's a man from Japan after World War II. There's a woman, a cellist, who can't play the cello anymore, which is based on someone I went to grad school with. So there are definitely pieces of truth, but there is no glass house, as people in my writing group wanted to know. Where is it?
Well, okay, now that brings up another question, because as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of people in the audience who are writers. So you are a member of a writers group, a group that critiques, gives feedback?
I'm a member of two groups. I kind of go on and off. One's a larger group, one's a smaller group. I write well by myself. I like to have someone exchange manuscripts with.
It's always helpful to get those fresh eyes in there. Well, Krisha, I really appreciate your being here on the show tonight and sharing the information about Maps and Shadows. It's a beautiful book, a beautiful family story, and what a legacy you leave for everyone. Let me just say also thank you to my crew, and especially to Jessica Batchelor, who is filling in for us tonight. I really, really appreciate that. And finally, let me close with the words of the fantasy writer Ursula Le Guin, who said, "There have been civilizations that did not use the wheel, but there have been no civilizations that did not tell stories. So find your story or your family's story and find a way to tell it. And do join us again next time." Thank you.
Food for the crew and guests was provided by Manchester Grill of Manchester, Connecticut, and Angelo's Restaurant of Glastonbury, Connecticut. Be sure to send your writing questions and your comments on the book club selection to Zita at page 1, P.O. Box 1515, Manchester, Connecticut, 06045-1515, or send an email to Zita at page1tv.com.